Hey folks, we're back. I'm your host, BKP. We are at Circuit World, and we have a poor weather report according to you, right?
Yeah.
Exactly why are we here?
Yesterday, I looked at the weather. Oh, this is Dr. William Whaley. He is back. Ask the doc, Dr. Raymond Tidman. I looked at the weather yesterday. They have that Doppler radar thing and whatever.
Yeah. No spending time. You know, that's the only job you can have where you can be wrong half the time and still keep your job. We've got our summer colors on here. That's what matters.
And it's going to rain tomorrow.
Okay. How are you today?
Present and unaccounted for. I'm fired up today because I'm dressed for where I will be this week.
Oh, you going to BVI tonight?
Yeah.
Today?
Yes.
Are you going to be here next Friday?
I got full pusser on here.
Are you going to be here next Friday?
No, I will not. I will be.
Where are you going?
Be in the islands.
In the islands. Okay. Good for you.
Well, you know, can you get in there without a COVID test now?
Yes, if you're vaccinated or if you've had COVID within the last 90 days, you can get in. And they've cut their masking rules.
And now,
But their prime minister was arrested for pushing drugs in Miami, so things are changing.
Do you have to have a positive antibody test or just a note saying you had COVID and recovered? So I could write you a note saying you recovered.
Yeah, I know people.
Okay, but when we arrived in Italy, we had to have a negative COVID test within 72 hours, as you know.
Yeah.
And then arriving in Italy 8 days later, they had stopped that. So,
but you had to have it to get in, but not to get back out.
No, you had to have it to get in both ways, but as of a week before we got there.
Yeah.
But but they changed it in the middle of that week, and.
Well, they're still in the same places. I think they still wear masks in Washington State. I mean, I don't know.
In Canada, you had to have a negative test, but they had to divert a bunch of our people into Montreal, and they did not make them get tested to let them off the plane and go to a hotel and wait 2 days to get another flight. So
Canada's gone full tyrant.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway.
All right, well, wait a minute. So, traveling, how many shots do you have to have? Vaccines?
They still consider most of the world 2 shots.
What are they up to now? What are they up to? Like
I think
4?
I think it's every 90 days now.
No. The official recommendation of the world, the Chicken Little in the world is falling, is a series of 2.
Right.
6 to 9 months later, a booster. 6 to 9 months later, another booster. Well, that gets you then to 2 full years, you see, and we're at 2 full years and 2 months now. So we're less than 2 years since it came out. So nobody can. Dr. Fauci hasn't made his decision yet about whether you should get one every 6 months. But
they just ordered another $1 billion worth of shots from.
Not billion, for 3.2 billion or something.
Yeah,
for kids. And it's
just print it.
But my concern is it's the new formula
for the kids.
It's
not
and
new
improved.
Formula. No. It's the dose. It's no new formula. It's the same vaccine from the original thing. It only makes the antibodies for 90 days now. So I don't know where they get the 9 months thing. It's all very, very confusing.
Well, there's a new formulation that's got some Omicron in it. And it's been released in the last week or 2, and I think that's what the $3 billion was spent for. Okay, let's go back. We're not here. We're here to talk about cancer, but 12.1 is still the number of positive tests per week in the state of Georgia. 12.1%. That has not changed since the start of the Omicron. Fannin County's death rate remains 0 per week on a moving average, and in the last 8 weeks there have been 2 deaths. We were at 161, then 160, 161, 162. Nobody's died in a month. And the case rate was 0, 0, 0. It's been 3, and I happen to know at least one of those who's in the hospital. So I think that there's still people that are getting this virus, and most of them are blowing their nose and doing fine, and some small number are not.
And most importantly, if you have a treating doctor who treats COVID and you call them within 3 days, you can get over it. It's a treatable disease.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that even if you don't know you got it, there's so much of it out there that I think is raising the natural immunity. All right, so now
we'll end with saying go enjoy your 4th of July activities.
But be real low cholesterol on your hamburger. How'd you like that?
No.
That was a joke. You know, I can tell when I'm joking, you know?
All right.
I mean,
We're treating you very seriously.
my wife tells me I'm the worst joker that ever was. So no, I don't care whether you put cheese, 2 pieces of cheese on your big, juicy hamburger, prime beef, high fat content, but cook it over a fire. Because there's one slide coming up in question 2 that reverts back to your hamburger cooking.
Thank
So
you,
speaking of-
Jane, for letting us know.
Well,
he
speaking
is
of
the
wives,
worst
yeah.
joker.
So my wife doesn't like my sense of humor, but let me tell you, when she pranks you, you've been pranked.
So she doesn't like your sense of humor, but she likes pranks.
Thinks I'm. Oh my goodness, she will pull a prank on you.
I don't like pranks.
Yeah.
Nothing. I dislike
Yeah.
those pranksters out there. The
Yeah.
pranksters.
Okay, well I'll tell her.
No, I don't tell her. Don't tell her.
What's that got to do with cancer?
I don't know.
Let's talk about radon. Come on, let's get going here.
All right. Now you could be blowing the thing here. All right. Interestingly enough, as we were talking in the green room, even before BKP went on, these 2 questions today are both questions that I am confident were precipitated by a very large report that came out from the American Cancer Society, the National Institutes of Health, and was widely disseminated not only in the United States but in Western Europe about the 15th of June. And it was cancer death rates in the United States fall and cancer death rates in Western Europe fall, same socioeconomic type group, but that the lung cancer death rates were falling greater than the others, and that was making up most of the fall in the newest falls in death rates. The other piece was the targeted therapies, quite obviously, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so here's the first question. And BKP doesn't like the way this lady describes her 67-year-old
Well, you
husband.
tell everything.
My husband is 67 years old and in excellent health. BKP says, how do you know that? I says, well, probably he takes no medications. He doesn't have any surgery. And BKP says, well, he should say he feels good. I said, look, you can have a quadruple bypass and brittle diabetes and feel good. There's a difference. So I think this is the accurate way. Don't you?
Yeah.
All right. He has never smoked or worked around any chemicals. He has non-small cell lung cancer, and I read about radon exposure. Here's the crucial piece. Somebody in this thing here is absolutely on the money. We live in Decatur area, and our home is on the granite from Stone Mountain. Now, people that are outside of our area, there's a largest stone monolith in the world is Stone Mountain, Georgia. That granite, that thing runs hundreds of miles in every direction, and everything in and around Atlanta, and Decatur's around Atlanta, is built on granite. So when they dug the MARTA tunnels, it was a real engineering feat for all those guys from Georgia Tech that were civil engineers to dig through granite to build a subway system.
And all the curbs in Atlanta are from the granite from Stone Mountain.
Yeah. And
Do you know that?
the capital is too.
Yeah.
All right, I bought a kit at the hardware store. And by the way, yesterday the Supreme Court ruled against the EPA over emissions from coal-fired power plants, and the radon kit deal is an EPA recommendation that you go get yourself a radon kit and stick it in your basement. So, all right, I went to the hardware store, and it says radon exposure is higher than average, but not above the hazard level. So it's an elevated one, but it doesn't reach some, quote, trigger point that the EPA has chosen to use. Could this have anything to do with my husband's cancer? Well, the answer to that is yes. I'll say that in a minute. And could we get compensation from the state?
No.
Everybody gets compensation from somebody, but I guarantee you there's no way to get compensated from the state. Now, the second thing was she wants to know about her builder. Our home is 50 years old, and the builder is long deceased. So she tells us that because I think she wanted to know could she sue the builder. Don't that sound
I
like
guess
that
you go
right?
piss on his grave or something.
Yeah, all right. So basically, the question is about a condition which is called non-smoker cancer of the lung. Now, I want to make this clear. If you have a high incidence of lung cancer, 80% or more of which during most of the time has been related to smoking, and the cigarette smoking falls off, and the lung cancer percentage caused by tobacco falls off, and then of the people who still smoke, the early detection CT scan diagnoses the lung cancer when it's curable, then the death rate for tobacco-related lung cancer falls. But the number of non-tobacco-related lung cancers remains the same. So the percentage of lung cancer that is now non-tobacco-related is going to shock you when we go through the rest of this question. But that's the basic question she's asking. Does my husband, who's a non-smoker, fall into this radon group or some other group, and will somebody pay us for it? Okay, put this next one up.
All right, while you're turning that page, so why don't we have, for people who are having environmental exposures, aka radon, why don't they get a CT scan paid for by their insurance?
That's the question. It's part of the question. We're going to be here and here a little bit later. Okay, put that first one up. That was the headline. Read it out loud.
Risk of dying from cancer continues to drop at an accelerated pace.
All right. Now, that was mostly some breast cancer and other cancers because of targeted therapies. But in terms of absolute magnitude, the lung cancer is clearly the number, because you got 280,000 cases of lung cancer. And if you drop that a lot, it's a big number. So put this next one up. This whole question then, got the next one up there, is about this. We've never talked about this in 5 years. What's that say?
Lung cancer in never smokers.
Okay, that's a.
It happens.
Pull that down. It not only happens, but it happens a lot, and there are variable things to it. So I'm gonna throw a few of these up kind of quick. First one, put the first one up. These bars are total lung cancers. These bars are non-smokers, but you notice the height of these other bars varies depending on what part of the world you're in. So there is something that has to do with geography. You can pull that down. A lot of what has to do with geography has to also do with ethnicity and genetics. In other words, there's a whole lot fewer African Americans in Scandinavia than there are in Florida or there are in South America, right? All right, the next one up, this is the best example. Asian women are historically the highest number of patients who had non-tobacco related lung cancer, generally always adenocarcinoma. And there was a specific genetic marker that had a targeted therapy for it. So this is just Asians and Westerners. Pull that one down. So we're saying Westerners then are again America and Western Europe. So we're putting all those together. Now this is going to shock, stun, and amaze you. Got that next one up there? If you look, now this is back a few years ago, at the number of deaths from, first is leukemia, 21,000 a year. Next is lymphoma, 21,000 a year. And the next is radon-related lung cancer, it's 21,000 a year. Now, that's way below that is esophagus, ovaries, cervix, melanoma. Pull that down. So, according to...
That's cancers by tissue type.
That's cancers.
Number of cases or deaths?
Deaths. These are all deaths.
Something you said earlier, and I want to get into this,
right.
As you said, genetic markers.
That's the targeted therapies we've been talking about. The Jimmy Carter drug, Keytruda, where you have a marker that lets you use that drug. Remember, we've talked about Alk and Ross with lung cancer and EGFR with colon cancer. Those are treatments that are not chemo, not radiation, and not surgery that are directed at genetic changes that caused the cancer.
But you brought up Asian women.
Yes.
So could we have 7 different ethnicities living in the same area with the same amount of radon, that some will get cancer more than others?
Question we haven't got the answer to, but it's clearly yes.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
there's a bigger picture.
You understand
Bill.
what I said?
Well, yeah, but I think it's an interesting question. I think the audience would have the question that you're asking. Bill just held up a data sheet from, I think that's the SEER site. So if you go to SEER.
Survey and end results reporting is what that means.
So that's a site where they specifically go and look at the rates of cancer that are occurring, and they keep it very current. And you can go to that site and learn a lot about different cancers, different types, ethnicities, and other risk factors, and just learn about that. Because the first question I got asked when I moved here, there was the mining in town.
Right.
There were a lot of smokers in town. It was age-adjusted, the oldest county in the state. So a lot of cancers here, and a lot of hazards. And people want to know, well, am I living in a hazardous area? Is there a habit that I have? Is there something in my family? Those are good questions. So, and that's a good site to go and just kind of look at the hard data and study on that. And then ask your doctor.
Now let's going to go back again. We're going back to the EPA again and the Supreme Court. Clearly, air pollution, separate from radon. When you smoke, when your town has got, when you fly into Mexico City in the jump seat, which I did for years, about 100 miles away from Mexico City, it looks like there's a brown coffee cup going up into the air. And that is the air over Mexico City. You can see 100
Which
miles
has
away.
what are there, like 10 million people there? Same thing with Beijing. I mean, you have massive concentrations of people in really bad air.
Yeah, and they're cooking in the yard, and then LA is the same way. So you got people worry about air pollution. We're going to come up with another one here in a few minutes. So radon is just one. Okay, so put up this next one. Radon. The number one environmental cause of cancer deaths and the second leading cause of lung cancer deaths. So radon is immediately under tobacco. Pull that down. Do you have a TV set?
Yes.
Have you ever turned it on to a cable channel?
Yes.
Occasionally.
Okay.
I would say that among the ads that you see, in the top 3 is Joe McGillicuddy's law firm and mesothelioma and lung cancer. I mean, that is a recurring ad on cable television. Mesothelioma is related to asbestos exposure. And my dad used to be the head lawyer for the asbestos defense panel in the South, and that would be people in the Navy who worked in boiler rooms, people who worked around brakes or brake linings in automobiles, people who worked over here at Copper Basin. That what got them was the asbestos down in the copper mine, not the copper, not the dirt or anything else. It was the asbestos. So there's a huge amount of lawsuits and everything else against the industry, and if you just walk near asbestos one time in your life, you're going to get some money. And
You got a lawyer attached to you. Hey, BKP, do you know why New Jersey has all the toxic waste dumps and New York has all the attorneys?
No, I don't.
New Jersey had first choice.
Now that's funny. Okay, let's go back. So there is a lobby for the asbestos-related. Now, this is a serious cancer question here.
All right.
There is a lobby for the asbestos-related lung cancer because there's somebody to sue with deep pockets, and there is $14 billion or $18 billion in a bank account somewhere that was placed there by John Mansville, the people that make brake linings in all of industry, and the federal government. And that pool is where these law firms get their money.
Interesting you said John Mansville, because you're going back in time when it was John Mansville. When they settled the asbestos, it went to Manville.
Yeah, my dad was a lawyer for them.
Right. They settled it. It
And
went
they
to
changed the
Manville.
name, correct.
To Manville. So
All right.
I'm getting it.
All right, you got it. So There is no lobby for radon because God gave you radon. Radon comes out of the earth beneath your house. It comes particularly out of stone where you would be mining and granite. And this guy's totally correct. And we put a radon thing in our home in Atlanta. Our home was 70, 80 years old. It was right over the thing. Jane got all fired up about radon, and it was way over the click limit. 4 is the click limit. So we started looking around for one of these radon free your house with radon.
Which just increases the ventilation in your crawl space. That's all they do.
Well, what they do first is a wallet biopsy.
Yeah, sure.
They do a wallet biopsy, and they check your...
Well, they can do that by your address.
They check your zip code. That's exactly what they do. They check your zip code. And if you call them from a 30327 zip code, it's going to be $50,000 to $80,000. If you call them from a 30342 zip code, it's going to be $4,000.
Yeah.
And it's the same work and the same people at the same place.
Same set of fans, same set of ducts.
This radon business is not well regulated.
Let's digress on that for a minute. It's interesting that you had a house where you did that, because I'm totally against the new fourth arm of government, the regulatory state, and finally the Supreme Court's dealing with it. But making recommendations is useful.
Yeah.
And it is useful to know, hey, I could have my house parked on top of a granite or stone that's got a lot of radon in it. What do I do about it? Well, you go get the kit, you find out, is that the case? And if there's radon there, I don't care what the number is. That's silly, the number.
There's going to be a number.
There's going to be a number. But if there's anything more than 0,
well, that's right.
There's no radon in my house. I'm on a sand pile. But
yeah, there's no safe dose of radiation.
There's no safe dose of radon.
Safe dose of tobacco. There's no safe dose of
radon.
So,
and the fix is not that hard. I mean, basically, they just ventilate. They blow that air out of there and disperse the radon out of concentrating under your house.
Yeah, and
it's not trapped.
And if it's wet under there, they put some kind of aluminum foil or something on the ground, which that keeps the mold out of there or something. Yeah. And so lots of good things can happen.
Things can come out of that. So, yeah, it's smart knowing about where you live.
All right, so let's go to the next one here. Radon facts. All right. Radon is produced by the breakdown of uranium, you got that up there, in soil and rocks. Well, how many houses aren't built off of soil and rocks? Now, Ray says his is on sand, but if you put a thing under there, we'll come to this again in a minute, it's going to be a number. And it'll probably be 1 to 2. That's the kind of background, not bad number. All right, but put up the next one. This is an interesting, think of some of the things that we have talked about here that are dangerous. I said that if you read the obituaries in the Atlanta newspaper, where you'll see so many of them say, died as the results of a fall, or died due to complications of a fall. Or you'll get a phone call from a friend or patient and says, my father was killed last night, hit by a drunken driver. So these are things that we think are hazardous to our health. So if you look at the relative risks, I want you to look carefully. Radon is there. Mm-hmm. What's the next one? Drunken driving.
Now, where's this website? Where'd you get this from?
Falls in the home. This is
CDC site?
This is from the CDC. Okay. What's the next one? It's drowning.
Yes.
What's the next one? Because we're going to come to this at the next question. Secondhand smoke is way down there next to home fires. People are always bitching and moaning about the smoke in the environment, and nobody's talking about the radon. But
they're not talking about the radons, but I tell them, I say, put your damn seatbelt on.
Right. Okay, well, here we put on the next one. This is sort of a rough way of trying to say what your risk is, and I'm going to comment on this here on the next question. But at 2 picocuries per liter of air, that's equivalent to 4 cigarettes smoked a day, and that is the safe level, quote, end quote.
Yeah, I don't think 4 cigarettes a day is safe.
I don't either. When you get to 4, that's the level at which you'll call in the folks. That's 8 cigarettes a day, And if you get to 10, that's a pack of cigarettes a day. So pull that.
So that radon level, you're doing a comparison on if you're a smoker.
Smoker.
Right.
So how much smoking would do toward your lung cancer.
Bill, I'm feeling the need to go out and buy stock in that Radon kit company.
But the point is there's no lobby. It's not
No.
like asbestos where there's
Right.
this big thing. It's not like breast cancer where you've got a ribbon. It's not like prostate cancer where you've got a PSA and you've got all of these celebrities on television and you've got a ribbon. So radon is kind of a forgotten thing, and unless somebody's an entrepreneurial young man, generally a young man, gets on this in a community and starts talking about it and giving away radon kits or making radon
Yeah.
kits cost $2 instead of 100.
Because those low volume fans that pump air out from under your house, that's not an expensive fix. So you need to nail that market.
Yeah, and another thing is to be out there to tell people, and then but part of it does come to putting the
Knowledge.
barrier.
The barrier down and
keep
ventilating it.
Yeah.
Are you dealing now with more non-smoker related lung cancer than you are smoker related?
The last 2 lung cancers I've seen are in non-smokers. Now the definition, I'm going to have to fog on the definition a little bit, because historically the definition has been that if you've played with cigarettes in college and as an adolescent and you've been stopped for 50 years, you're a non-smoker. And the patient that I saw yesterday met that criteria. But the second criteria she also met was she had lived for 30 years with a husband who smoked a pack a day. They've been divorced for 25 years. So she has really been away
That's quite a math problem.
she's been away from tobacco, even secondhand, for 25 years. So at the end of the day on this question, I will say that indeed radon might have a role, but we know nothing about how much exposure. He's had to air pollution, but there's a lot of pollution in Atlanta. We have no knowledge of whether when he was a child and a young adult living with his parents smoked, right? So there's a lot of silence in that question, even though he has not smoked, never worked in the chemical industry, never lined brakes. We don't know that he never lined brakes, but still, the answer to the question is yes, radon could have had something to do about it.
You know where we have no pollution? No water pollution. We got cleanest water in the world here and cleanest air in the world. I'm not saying move to Blue Ridge. We got plenty of people here, but
You know something else we have? We got the right amount of rain. I mean, really, seriously. We had a drought.
no, we have the right amount of rain.
We had a drought a few years ago. But if you look at the annual rainfall here, it is absolutely ideal for farming, and it's perfect.
And we got the right amount.
So are you saying it could possibly rain and you have to be ready for it?
You have to be thankful for it.
Grateful. Gratitude. We're into
Right.
gratitude.
So you can't take those extra chances to like be outdoors if you think it's going to rain.
No, Take chances.
you're not-
You need to take
this time of
chances.
year, you're not going to melt. It might have been hard on your equipment, though.
Thank you.
Nothing,
All right,
nothing
let's-
wrong with running off a mountain under a parasail.
I think that's even more dangerous than the, that's more hazardous than
Let's get to
radon.
question 2.
Okay, this question comes out of, I think, the same announcement. My wife was a heavy smoker, and she had smoker's high-risk CT scan. Now, that was the reason, one of the reasons that these tobacco-related deaths have fallen off,
Because we're finding it early.
because we're finding it early. And a very early lung cancer was found. She has been cured by surgery and has been disease-free for 5 years. Now, I want to say again, 5 years is a big number. Take gratitude in that, but I always say you know you're cured of cancer when you what? Die of something else. Because it can come back. But 5 years is a good guarantee. So I'm going to let you have that. I heard today on the radio about the ACS study. Now, that's the same one. See, they just came out. that secondhand smoke is a cause of 3% of lung cancer. Now, he focused on that 3% of lung cancer. The radon was 21% of it, wasn't it? So the secondhand smoke was way down there next to house fires, wasn't it? When you looked at that, that thing. So he has seized on what has been well advertised. I'm going to make some comments about that because I agree with it. Can I get a screening CT scan like she had? I have never smoked, but I was around her for 30 years and she smoked 2 packs a day. I can tell you right off the bat, the answer to that question is no.
No, wait a minute. You can't get the frickin' insurance company to pay for it.
Excuse me, yes.
But if you got a wallet and there's a need, and your doctor says, hey, you should go get this done, make it happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you another way you can happen too, is there is a for-profit company that advertises on the radio, and one of their advertisers is a young woman from Blue Ridge who is a producer for WSB, has been down there for 20 years. She used to be Neil Bortz's producer. And she advertises, I don't remember what it's called, life screening or something or other, where they will do a low-dose CT scan for $150. And they offer that, I think, a month a year, maybe during their cancer month or something. And that's $150 worth spending. I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is your health, and that's not a large sum of money, and it does a good job.
Yeah,
so.
and the hazard of that is they might find a little spot somewhere, and then the radiologist covering his fanny says there's a confluence of shadows may be more apparent than real that may represent a pulmonary nodule, can't rule out lung cancer, and then you go back and get a bunch of tests done. But anyway, at the end of the day, there really is worth doing.
You know what the plant for the Radiological Association is, right? The hedge. I'm full of myself today.
No, but you got.
I'm wondering here. I am.
You got to think. If you missed that, he says the plant for the American College of Radiology is the hedge, not the rose or the. All right. I'm going to make a confession first. As many of you know, for 40 years I was heavily involved in the airline industry. And I was a witness in most of the lawsuits all over the United States that were brought on behalf of flight attendants against airlines for exposure to secondhand smoke. So I did a clinical trial about 35 years ago when they smoked on airplanes. And my wife.
But just in the back of the airplane.
They smoked in the whole airplane. So my wife and I.
As though it makes a difference. That's
my wife point. And I on TWA flew from New York to Paris and collected the urine of the flight attendants on that trip, the 24-hour layover, the trip back, and the 24-hour period before the flight, the 24 hours of the layover, the flight back, and the 24-hour period after it.
So you had urine from exposure period, non-exposure period, exposure
now,
period.
The second thing is we were measuring sex hormones because of the issue of pregnancy and flight attendants, which were messed up. But you excrete cotinine, which is a byproduct of nicotine in your urine, depending on what your dose of tobacco was. Mm-hmm. The average was 1.5 cigarettes per flight. Now, an international flight attendant generally flies 4 trips a month, which would be 2 flights, 1 in each direction. So that would be 8 cigarettes a month. And so when we got to testifying, the risk of 8 cigarettes a month in terms of lung cancer and chronic lung disease was not statistically high enough to be able to blame a bunch of stuff on it. But at the end of the day, the juries didn't see it that way, and they gave the flight attendants a ton of money. But that was the science behind that. So now we're going to talk about secondhand smoke, and we will talk a little bit about some of that stuff. So put the first one up. That just shows you the secondhand smoke, and there's somebody blowing smoke out of there.
Listen, I just want to congratulate you on that. That was forward thinking.
It was.
Because that's a cool study. Because you have a very controlled group in a controlled environment for a controlled period of time.
Yeah. Plus, Jane and I rode first class.
Yeah, you got it right. And that was when everybody smoked everywhere on the planes. Because when I was a kid, they only smoked in the back of the plane.
Yeah, they could smoke anywhere in the plane. No, that's right. There was a non-smoking and a smoking section. Now, this is what everybody can smoke.
But it's all the same air, so it's kind of goofy to me.
It's crazy. Yeah. All right. So put this up. This is the place, the most important place. Where's that? It's a pregnant woman. Right?
Mommy's tummy.
This is the most important place, in my opinion, where the secondhand smoke really, the advertising about it is worth doing, because secondhand smoke to a pregnant woman, if it's significant, let's say the husband's smoking a pack and a half, 2 packs a day, and they're in the house together. Now, if he's smoking a pack and a half, 2 packs a day while he's out driving a tractor and she's at home without smoke, it's not as big a number. But there's actually a diminished birth weight, and there is a diminished APGAR score in the children of women who are exposed to heavy passive smoke. What's an APGAR score? What's an APGAR score?
That's your risk of having serious medical problems as you're being born.
When you're born.
There's at birth, and there's...
How quickly do you cry?
3 minutes later.
How quickly do you cry? How many of this
How much do you wiggle?
Yeah.
How much do you punch the doctor?
If you come out screaming and jumping, you're an APGAR 10.
Yeah.
If you come out limp as a rose and have to be resuscitated...
You come out grabbing the obstetrician by the tie, you got a 10.
Okay, put the next one up. This is just a list of things. Now, be careful to look at this list, because this is the list of some of the stuff that's in tobacco smoke. Benzene, that doesn't sound good, does it? That's a chemical. But the next one is kind of interesting. What's that say? Tobacco-specific nitrosamines. Now, what does that tell you? You can pull that down now. Here's a bunch more.
Got nitrites in it. That's not good.
Yeah, but down at the bottom, you got cadmium and a bunch of stuff.
Ooh.
Okay, what is nitrosamine? Why do they tell you not to eat sausage and bacon? Because they are preserved with nitrosamines. So here in the smoke is the same stuff you're getting when you get your ham and eggs and your bacon. Any preserved pork and meat has got nitrosamines in it. Now, when you fry that hamburger on the grill, remember they say that if you get it too dark and it gets burned, what do you get in the black of your hamburger? Nitrosamines. So,
well, if you go a little bit further, you get charcoal.
You get charcoal. I'm not particularly worried about nitrosamines in your hamburger. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting, that's number 2 on the list. So that's worrying all these chemists. Okay, let's put the next one up. This is crystal clear. When particularly children are exposed to secondhand smoke, well done studies in pediatrics, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta participated in one. They have more in the way of middle ear disease. They have more in the way of non-allergic type asthma. And if they're infants, there's more in the sudden infant death syndrome in the smoking house than the non-smoking house. Take that down. We're talking about lung cancer, though. We're not talking about any of the rest of those things. So here's this lung cancer prevention tips, even if you don't smoke. This comes out of the American Cancer Society. Now, what do you think the first lung cancer prevention tip if you don't smoke is? After we've just sat here, we've talked about radon, right? We've talked about secondhand smoke. Lung cancer prevention tips, even if you don't smoke. Eat a wide range of vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. The point I'm coming to is that there are so many things you can do to mitigate your risk of malignancy. And it isn't all checking for radon, and it isn't all running your husband out the house to not smoke. But the second thing on that list was radon detection. So,
Art, I can take a little digression on that for a second.
I sent you that.
I tell my ladies in particular whose husbands still smoke, I said, you make it so miserable for him that he has to go out on the roof to smoke, he'll eventually quit. But when I was a young student before the MD, a bunch of us had this notion that we really wanted to get after young people who were picking up smoking. And I had thought back to my first grade teacher had this thing about Coca-Cola. She didn't like Coca-Cola anyway. She has, when you're in first grade, you have teeth coming out and people bring in teeth. So one day she said, well, bring in some teeth. So a bunch of the kids brought in teeth, and in the jar on the window of water, she put a couple teeth in there, and a jar of Coca-Cola, she put a couple teeth in there. And the next day, every day we'd come in and we'd go over there as little kids and look at those teeth. And you didn't have to look at it more than once or twice to say, I'm never going to drink that Coca-Cola stuff.
That way it would go away in less than a week.
Yeah, you'd have just a little black pith of something in the Coca-Cola glass. Okay, so that's, visual things are very effective with young people. So as students, we went and raided the pathology lab and got some lung samples, okay, in formalin. And we went out to the schools in jars, and we went out to the schools and showed. No, we took them out and put them so the kids could touch them. But so a young, healthy lung of someone who died in a car wreck, never smoked or anything like that, is this beautiful pink, soft, glistening tissue. The lung of a smoker is this gray and black, mottled, nasty looking thing. I'm talking about the lung. Holes in it, and when you touch it, it's kind of crunchy. Okay? So you show those to kids and say, okay, non-smoker, smoker, which one are you going to be? It's very effective.
But that'd be child abuse now.
That'd probably be child abuse now.
All right, let's go to the next one here. Questions about screening chest CTs, right? All right, so I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, recommendations came out to change them. But basically, the recommendation upon which you can get the screening chest CT paid for by your insurance is that you had reached the age of 55. Now it's pushed down to 50. You had smoked 30 pack years. So a half a pack a day for 60 years or 2 packs a day for 15 years. That's all 30 pack years. And you had to have stopped smoking. If you've stopped smoking, you had to stop smoking less than 15 years ago. If it was greater than 15 years ago, they sort of threw you in that non-smoking column. So there's nothing about the new recommendations, which have lowered it to 20 pack years, lowered the age, would allow this patient who had secondary smoke, pull that down, who had secondary smoke exposure to get any sort of an x-ray or breathing test or anything else. And if he wanted to do it, he could go down to Atlanta when they're doing that $150 one. I think they do it a whole month every year. Just keep your ears open and go do it. Now put the next one up. So I want to say what the advantages are of this low-dose CT. Have you ever had a CT scan? Well, he and I have had 100 of them. And you got it, I had an MRI.
They just check us to make sure we still got brains.
Yeah, well, but anyway, but you have to lie still and you have to hold your breath and you have to do all this stuff. And some things like when I had knee and shoulder injuries with athletics, when they're doing your shoulder, your knee, that was when the machine was small and claustrophobic. It went bang, bang, bang like that. I mean, it wasn't a pleasant thing. It'd take as long as an hour and a half. CT scan of the chest for diagnostic purposes takes at least 40 minutes, and you've got to hold your breath 100 times. But the CT for the lung cancer it is high speed. You only have to hold your breath one time. And it has a very low dose of radiation compared to normal CT scans. And insurance will pay for it. So
it's very, very fast.
It's very fast and particularly accurate for the purposes that you're doing it for.
So we're moving things along here, and we've hit on very interesting. You started out with that the court's gone after the regulatory state, which is completely unaccountable to anyone, and now they're going to be made accountable or get out of our lives. The state of living where you have no accountability leads to terrible things.
No kidding.
And an incredibly terrible thing happened this week, and I'm not. Bill can snap this off really quick, so I'm just going to ask him real quick. You've dealt with heat stroke.
Oh yes.
In athletes and other people.
Oh Lord,
okay.
Anytime.
Just real quick, digress for a second. Right. What happens to someone when they go into heat stroke?
Well, first of all, you got to talk about the 53 people.
Yeah, well, we'll go. I'm getting to that, but I want one person. Just say from a physician's perspective.
Well, first of all, let's assume for the sake of argument that you're out here in your garden when it's 100 degrees, and you are not getting a sufficient amount of water, but you begin to become. You get hot, you sweat, you stop sweating, then you have a loss of mental functioning, altered mental status, then you become cramping and you go into sort of a coma.
And you're panting, and you're panicking.
You're like a dog who's in the heat, like that. It's miserable. Oh, and then one of the things that happens if you're still awake enough to know it is you get bad cramping because your water in your bowel,
and you may seize.
And it hurts like that. Yeah, see, that comes with all through consciousness.
All right, so you see where I'm going with this, because I'm so incised by this. It's I'm having nightmares about it. You put what initially was it 48 people? They don't know how many more died.
53 now.
53. You basically have some people.
So there are like 8 that are still alive, right?
Well, let's get down to the brass tacks here. You put 50 people in a box with no ventilation,
and no
with
water.
no light and no water, and you cook them slowly.
That's what you do.
Okay.
You know
Then you're in a room with
is.
people moaning, crying, struggling, panting, some seizing, pissing, pooping, peeing themselves, the smells of that. And we're not talking about some death camp where they put a little powder in and kill everybody all at once, which is a horrendous thing. We're talking about slow cooking human beings.
Yeah, it would take a day and a half or 2 days to kill them.
Okay? So as hell as you can imagine on earth. And I'm like, that has to be dealt with. What led to that has to be dealt with. Instead of sending arms all over the place and building up the military-industrial complex and making all this kind of stuff, whatever it takes to go deal with the animals that created that situation needs to be dealt with. That should have never happened. It can never happen again. It is nightmarish that it went on. And from a physician's perspective, knowing what those poor people went through is a nightmare. It's just unbelievably sick. And the news are running around blaming different people, okay? And you can blame the insects that drove that truck that let that happen. But there's another whole layer of system going on down there that would let those insects.
Put them in the boat.
That would let those, I'm calling those are not humans, those are insects. When you do that to other human beings, you don't qualify as a human anymore. So, I'm sorry, that has to be dealt with, and it should not be, no one should stop talking about this until they've changed whatever's going on down there to stop it.
You know, you have brought something up that really changed. I'm stepping back and looking at this a different way. I have been very upset by it. Very upset. We're going to talk about it in our next segment. But until this morning, I didn't look at it or understand it.
I want people to understand it from you were in that. If you were in that place, what would it feel like? You need to get your head in that place and think, how in the world could this ever happen?
Right.
Be allowed to happen again?
And that is, I mean, it's horrific to think about all the things they went through before death.
Flip over to 2 or 3 weeks before that. They had a boat there in the Gulf of Mexico that was trying to come around to Brownsville, Texas, that flipped over and drowned 25 people. Nobody survived. How'd those 25 people get in some kind of a rubber boat that the water flipped over and they drowned? Drowning ain't fun either. There's no way any of these coyotes who bring people in that, now if you walk them across the border and they get stopped and sent back, I suppose that's one way. But if you're packing them in a truck or you're packing them in a boat, nothing good's going to come of it. I mean, how many of them are successful versus not successful, I don't know.
And I'm not blaming those people. Those people are trying to get out of a bad situation. It's a natural human thing to try to get away from bad and get to good. They're not the problem.
No.
The problem is the people making money shipping them off. And we're talking about making billions of dollars of money here. These criminal gangs, they're in the billions of dollars of income. You buy a lot of power with the billions of dollars, okay? You own a lot of policemen. You own a lot of politicians. You create a whole corrupt state, okay? And it's sitting on our southern border, and we're letting it happen. Whatever the solution is, there is a solution. And the people that should be accountable in our government, in our society, are not being accountable, and they're not being held accountable, and we as American citizens have to hold them accountable.
And you take all the guys in the Border Patrol who are busting their hump.
Busting their hump.
They're busting their hump. They're working 12-hour days in the hot sun. They're finding these tunnels dig under the ground. They're inadequately staffed. They're poorly paid. And somebody somewhere is making a ton of money.
These good people go to become a policeman. They go into law enforcement. They're inclined to do that for a good reason, for the most part. For 99% of the time, they're there for the right reason and they're doing a good thing. Okay, and then you put them down there and you demoralize them. Say, well, yeah, you catch them, you release them. All you're doing is signing papers
any of those guys being interviewed now, they are very discouraged
and quitting.
Anyway, that was brought to you by the Georgia Cancer Specialist affiliated with the Northside Hospital Cancer Institute. You have blown it today, GPP. Northside
He couldn't get a word in edgewise.
Northside appreciates it, and we're getting ready to go to the green room to the expert panel and take it away.
Hey, wait a minute. Slow down there.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Thank you.
4th of July weekend, you got big plans?
No.
I've got the plans for him. So
it's gonna. The guy that's in charge of the fireworks over there is doing the fireworks at 9 o'clock at night on the 4th of July. Huh?
9:30.
Well, on the 4th of July.
4th of July.
That's a Monday.
That's right.
And I got to be at the office at 8 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday in Atlanta, so I can't be there to watch the fireworks. I mean, somebody can use my dock if they want.
Okay, well, it's back to you now.
I have a
He's gonna be in the Dominican Republic. I mean, in the BVI.
I'm going to be in paradise for the next 2 Fridays. I'll be dressed appropriately.
You can be there for 2 weeks.
10 days. So I'm spanning 2 weekends. And this weekend is a special person in my life's celebratory event. And there are lots of friends and family coming into town, so we're going to be very busy this week.
Like a birthday for your wife?
Yeah.
Easy. Celebratory event for somebody very special. There's a reason he
but when you get to be a certain age, you no longer
it's a celebratory event.
Yeah.
We'll be back right after these messages with the All-Star Political Panel.